My Lords, it's a great pleasure to follow the absolutely expert contribution of the Noble Lord, Lord Ahmed, and to agree with everything the Noble Lord just said. I join the universal commendations to the Noble Lady Baroness Hodgson for both her tenacity and practicality in bringing this simple but important bill through, and also for selecting the timing, because, as I think a number of other Noble Lords taking part in this debate were, I was last night at the Majinsky Human Rights Awards here in London, and we were hearing the tales and hearing personally stories of enormous courage and conviction from women and men who are doing so much to fight for peace and security in their communities. And that is a struggle, of course. Such awards can only mark a few people. So many women and girls around the world are showing that same courage and conviction, and this bill really is a humble but important recognition of that fact, that I would join the call to say surely the government can accept this bill. And I think there's an important point to make about the Majinsky Human Rights Awards and indeed the whole existence of Majinsky sanctions. They were driven by civil society. The leadership did not come from governments, as is the case in so many areas of human rights. Governments follow where civil society, where campaigning women and men lead, and this bill is a way of ensuring that that voice can be heard. Now, conducting this debate at this time, I do have to, when talking about women, peace and security, talk about the situation in Gaza. The figures out this month from the UN Human Rights Office, close to 70% of the victims verified by that office were women and children. This is in the context what the office described as unprecedented levels of international rights violations. And just yesterday, the UN Special Committee said Israel's policies and practices in Gaza were consistent with the characteristics of genocide. I cannot see how the National Action Plan can possibly be congruent with continuing any arms sales to Israel. An issue, an area that has not yet been raised, that I feel has to be raised, an issue of long-term interest of mine, is the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Nearly 6 million people have been killed there since 1996, and it has the world's largest population of internally displaced persons, 7.1 million people. North Kivu province is particularly impacted, and it is an area of massive long-term violence against women and girls, particularly sexual violence. And I note the MSF report, we are calling for help, acknowledging that 2024 saw a marked increase in violence. Now, I want to make a point which I'm going to very quickly come back to. The conflict there is driven by drive for control of important raw minerals, tin, tungsten, coltan and gold, collectively known as 3TG. Very briefly, I want to note the way in which the National Action Plan does not really seem to square with the government's approach of the UK Strategic Defence Review, which is separating out, as I've said in other contexts, the issues of defence from the broader issues of security, when they surely have to be considered together. As Rethinking Security, the NGO, has commented, we live in a world of complex, interconnected crises from the Middle East to the Horn of Africa. We need, for the sake of women and girls and everyone, a much greater focus on de-escalation. Finally, I want to come back to 2 points. One about the parliamentary scrutiny and the way in which that can very importantly join up connections and make connections that a siloed government may not. The Noble Lord the Minister may not have thought about the women's action plan, the action plan we're discussing here, and the action plan on antimicrobial resistance. But I'm going to point to the World Health Organization recent guidance on the key gender disparities in the prevention, diagnosis and treatment of drug-resistant infections. And I'll also point to the fact that the need to join these issues up. I mentioned the issues of IT and DRC. We were recently in your Lordship's House debating the Digital Assets Bill, in which I was the only female speaker. We need to ensure that women are always in the room of all of these issues relating to peace and security.